Uh, Today's speaker is Vaughan. Is a person like us with just a few years of experience as a BA and consultancy. The interesting thing is he started as a math and physics teacher, and somehow during his lifetime he decided he wanted to go and grow into doing some more complex issues, and he's now the owner of this Beyond BA group. Well, he specializes in complex issues and try to walk with the customers how they can walk all through this uncertainty and try to create value from it. So, Bon, thank you so much for being with us today, and the stage is
Brilliant.
all yours.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry, just a small announcement that I missed. Yeah, we're gonna have a Q&A through Slido. So Jesse, can you please share the link on the Zoom chat? So during the talk, you can start writing your questions, and then we are going to have a Q&A session at the end. Sorry for the last interruption, and the stage is all yours.
Brilliant. Okay, so what I want to talk about today is this concept of finding your project sweet spot. And so one of the key things I find is that there's a definition piece of understanding both yourself and understanding what a project environment's all about that is really important so that you don't set yourself up for failure or set others up for failure if you're bringing them into a project environment. So what we'll talk about today is a lot about understanding the types of projects where you fit and can do your best work so that you can sort of make the right choices about the sorts of projects you get involved with. Cool. Thank you, George. Cool. Okay, so the catalyst, before I talk about that, I'll explain my journey into the BA world because I grew up not having a single clue that BA was a role or a job or anything. I sort of grew up with my mum was a sort of an office manager, and my dad ran a kiwi fruit orchard. And I didn't really know anything about that world of projects or corporate or anything like that. So I grew up and, I guess I saw the thing I wanted to around me, and I wanted to be a high school teacher. So I went off and did my Bachelor of Science in Maths and Physics, uh, and then my graduate diploma of teaching secondary, and was going off to go teach in a secondary school when some recruiters from the Navy came round and said, "Hey, why don't you come teach in the Navy?" And that seemed like, I guess, too good an opportunity to pass up. So I randomly ended up for 4 years as an officer in the Royal New Zealand Navy, which is one of those experiences you can't buy. Very unique, and yeah, learned a lot. Learned a lot of things of what you, I guess, want to do, but also, other things in some of those big organizations. So from there, I left and moved to Wellington actually, and worked for a group called Systoc, and they are primarily a sort of a process and systems consultancy. So do a lot of procedure manuals and helping people with training areas and stuff for system adoption and things like that. So I was hired into there very much on the training side, and sort of accidentally from there fell into well, while you're here, why don't you help document some procedures and some processes? So, started writing the click here, do this. And then that segued into the world of business analysis. Um, Sort of that breaking into the first officially titled business analysis role was one that I did not find easy, as I'm sure many of you have experienced. If you don't have explicitly business analyst, on a job title somewhere in your CV history, it does become quite hard for certain recruiters to read between the lines. And I guess, I was at that point where, despite everything I was doing was very much business analysis, just without the label, it was quite hard to get into that first role. And eventually, my way in was, I had a friend that was working for the same company where I was applying, and she went and tapped the program manager on the shoulder and said, "Look at this CV." And the rest sort of was history in terms of, once you get that first foot in the door, it becomes a lot easier. So I certainly, I guess, understand the challenge of breaking into that world is not an easy one. So from there, I worked in large corporate in sort of business improvement and BA roles. I then went and worked for a group home builder after the earthquakes, and so went from massive organisations to a SME business, fighting the fires and working at that scale. And I've sort of now ever since been working a mixture of large corporates right down to small SMEs, and that's sort of been very useful for me to learn how to scale some of the skills that we do as BAs. I guess especially in that corporate world, you get used to having all the time in the world, or all the I guess low risk appetite. You go and work in a SME, and the thing that would take you 3 weeks in a corporate might have to take you a day. So it's certainly gives you a different perspective. So back to this slide where we're talking about the catalyst. So last year I went and did a outward bound course. So I went off 10 days on great time. But 2 of those days you end up spending by yourself in the bush with just, your thoughts and a notepad and all that. So I spent that time doing a lot of reflecting on what are the sorts of projects that I like, what are the things I don't. And some of the things I realized was what I don't like is business as usual. So anything where I'm stuck around too long makes me sad. And what I realized I really liked was the things where I'm working on really complicated, hard to wrangle problems. So I thought, okay, what I would like to do is go and just purely work on those problems. I want to, I guess, get out of the simpler stuff and work on that. But the challenge I had was that how do I educate the people that I want to work with of what types of projects I want to do, and also how do I recognize those projects? Cool. Thank you, George. And so this question of why alignment is important is one that I think is crucial because, as someone, if I'm working on a project that doesn't inspire me or doesn't challenge me, I'm not going to be giving my best. But equally, if I'm completely out of my depth on a project and I'm working in an environment that doesn't fit my skill set or the things that where I'm really can bring strength, I'm not going to be doing great service to the project. But equally, I'm going to be setting myself up in a position where I look, I look really not up to this job, but actually what it is I've got an alignment issue. There's going to be a whole heap of projects that everyone will fly in and do really well if you get that alignment right. And so it's really important from a personal point that you're really clear on that, because you can, I guess, do a lot of personal brand damage getting into that wrong alignment channel. But also, if you are someone that's hiring people into projects or bringing the right people into that world, getting that alignment right is key to the success of the project. Thank you, George. So what I have developed is a bit of an XY axis diagram of how I classify projects. So the first axis is relatively easy to understand. It's is it IT focused or is it business focused? And this is quite, everything nowadays is largely IT focused, whether while it's still being business focused. But having a clear understanding of this, just gets you in the right sorts of project as well. So things that I'm calling IT focused are often those really heavy, it might be an integration project, where if you don't understand the concepts of how integrations work and all of that, you're really going to struggle to add value. Whereas the business focused end of the spectrum is generally the ones where it's very heavily process orientated. So here's the business process and how we work that. And obviously people can span this axis really well, and you might live in the middle or live at both ends. But really understanding where you fit on that x-axis is important so that you, I guess, get aligned to the right sorts of projects. So often on that IT focus, you might see roles advertised as a technical business analyst or a system analyst or things like that. At the business focus end, you might see it as a business improvement partner or things like that. So step one, understand that spectrum and understand where you are most comfortable and where you can stretch. Thank you, George. And then we get to the fun one, which is about uncertainty. So at the top, we have well-defined problems. Down the bottom of the axis, we have undefined. And then if we keep sinking deeper on that axis, we get to highly undefined. And what changes this axis is all about what I call playbooks. So a playbook is something where, let's say if I go to do a HRIS, a human resource information system, so a payroll system, for example. If I'm going to go and roll a system like that out or be involved with a payroll switch project, there's actually a fairly standard playbook that I'm going to follow. I'm going to go through my general requirements and work out, is there anything weird and wonderful about what we do? And then we're going to identify, which systems could be possible and maybe go through a tender process and then reach a decision point. And then as we roll over, there's a pretty standard way that we go about it. So if I'm coming into a project like that, the framework that I'm approaching is relatively clear. And so I'm slotting into much more of a doing role. The plan's already there. I'm ready to go and knuckle down and get it done. As I get below the x-axis there, we get into what I call adapting the playbook. And so here, there's still a commonish way of how we'd approach the sort of problem, but we start having to bend that playbook to fit. So let's say if it's a merger between two organizations, this starts to get a lot more murky because it's not just a do this and do that. It's a how do I approach this? So you're still, there's a fairly standard way again of how you'd handle a merger, but you're having to always adapt that to the unique situations and things like that. And then I get into below that into the highly undefined problems. And this is really where we're inventing the playbook. So these are the sorts of problems where you turn up and they are vague or feel massive. No one knows where to start. No one really knows even how to define the problem. They might just think they've got a problem. There's no way. And it's not like you go, oh yeah, it's a one of these. I'm going to start here. Before you can start, the whole exercise is sitting back and going, how am I going to approach this? I'm now going to design that approach to approaching the problem, and then I can start the work. So one of the key things I sort of stress about this axis is this is not about seniority. So, I can be someone that's been doing BA work for 20 years. Where I live on the spectrum has almost nothing to do with my experience. It's much more about your personality and I guess those skill sets and things like that. So I might be a brand new BA just graduated and highly undefined is where I want to live. I look at things and I go, oh, that's how I'd approach it. That's how I'd do it. What experience allows is often lets you out of your comfort zone more. So someone that's been doing this for 20 years that lives really well in the well-defined problems may go, I can call on experience to dip below that axis for a while and get into my undefined problems, but I want to get back as soon as I can back up into my well-defined. So equally, So I think just want to stress that you really have to go, where do I play really well here and get that understanding. Thank you, George. So I want to open the floor and go, where do you fit? So give you a moment of silence to reflect here. So first of all, think about your x-axis. So are you IT focused versus a business focused? And where do you sit in that definedness? Do you like to turn up and go, oh yeah, there's a clear project plan here. There's clear tasks and outcomes and expectations. I'm going to turn up and hit that, and that's where I excel. Or I like it a bit vague. I like it where someone hasn't already told me how to go about it, that I've just been given the problem to solve and it's mine to own. And I feel much happier when I'm, not painted into a corner about how I have to do it. Or do you like going, hey, there might be a problem here. Let's sniff something out and really design. So yeah, have a think, and yeah, if you want, shove an answer into the chat, and we'll see. Sort of again, there's no wrong answer. This is really about being true to understanding yourself, so that you can make really clear decisions when looking for roles. Yeah, a couple more minutes to reflect on that. I do love the IT product dev roles that are undefined because I obviously hate myself. That's a beautiful answer. Cool. Some great answers in there. Yeah, no, and I think, yeah, just stressing back to um, there's no there's no wrong answer here. There's no, oh, if I'm not down the undefined end, then I'm not the right thing, or this is really about knowing yourself. Um, so one of the organizations that I've been doing a lot of work in, they tend much towards the undefined area of the spectrum. And I've seen people be put into that organization who do not sit comfortably in there. They have an absolutely miserable time. So it impacts, literally to the point, impacts your health. When you get into that misalignment state where you go, yeah, I like achieving things and getting things done or doing this, and I'm not because I'm used to a different environment. So there's a real light bulb moment when you understand why this sort of misalignment is happening and where it falls. And that also helps that if you are, I guess, put into a project or involved in a project where you're sitting in the wrong place on that spectrum, you can at least identify it, and hopefully you can step back and go, okay, if I'm used to or like well-defined problems, and I'm now sitting in an undefined one, I'm going to recognize that and go, okay, what I can do about this is now recognize that I am no longer about applying the playbook. I need to step back and work out how I'm going to approach this problem before I go and approach the problem. And it's quite an important step that if you find yourselves in those situations, take that step back, and you really have to shift skill set, because the skill set to define the playbook is completely different than applying it. Great. There's definitely a good range of answers there. Okay, George, next one. Cool. So setting up for success. So this is sort of what I was just talking about there, of going, if you end up, if you're someone hiring people into a project, being able to sit back and go, what sort of project is this? What sort of person do I need? And I actively talk about that spectrum and where people sit and explain where projects lie on that spectrum when we're looking to hire people or bring BAs on. And that's not about going, it's really about trying to set people up for success. Going, if if I bring you into a highly undefined project and you're very much used to and like working in a well-defined project, you will sink and we will not get the results we need. Equally, if I bring someone who loves doing the create the playbook stuff or adapt the playbook, and I bring them into a really highly structured project, they also probably will have a hard time because they'll go, but I want to do it this way or I want to do it that. So we really just have to take that time to set that up for success. Thank you, George. So the next point is the static. So what tends to happen in projects is if you start with a highly undefined project, eventually you go, well, here's how we're going to approach it. And every time you do that and you wrestle it into shape, it starts moving more and more up that y-axis. So eventually, if we do that enough, we end up developing the playbook. We've now wrestled that highly undefined project or problem into one that is well defined, where we now do have a playbook of how we're going to approach it. And so it's important to understand that tipping point as well, because we may need different resource on a project through the lifetime. So there's generally less people that sit comfortably in the highly undefined space and more that sit comfortably in the well-defined. So if we're using all I guess the people who like working on the highly undefined and they live through the project all the way to the end, they're going to spend a lot of their time working on highly defined problems. So it's just about thinking about, is there a switch point where you say bring in a new set of people, or switch who's doing some of those projects. Cool. Next slide. Cool. And then just to muddy the waters, there's a whole heap of other things that can impact that vertical axis. So one of them is culture. So if you go into an environment where there's a really poor culture, that can take what would normally be a well-defined problem, something up the top of that axis, and plummet it down to the bottom. Because now all the tools and tricks that you normally would have about getting that really nicely defined problem through get tripped up by the culture of the business. So it might be, if they're working in silos or no one contributes, or there's if you've got a really below the line culture in that place, you can have to really bring those projects into a different space. So whenever I start with a new client, culture is one of the big assessment points that I'm doing as I'm talking to them to understand, okay, what is this going to have an impact on how we deal with this project? The other one is time. So again, if we've got sufficient time, then a well-defined project is going to be great. If you put that same project now under shrink the time to a third of what it should take and say we need to get it done, that may change who's the right people to be on that project. If you have someone that's really likes to be methodical and deal with the risk and go, cool, we've crossed the I's, we've dotted the T's, and then you now put them on a project which we put into rush mode, you're also now gonna not gonna, I guess, necessarily cope or thrive in that environment. So just recognizing some of those other factors that change where you'll excel. And history is another big point. So if this is a project reset, then even when we go, it's a nice clear-cut payroll system, but the last payroll system that they rolled out went so poorly that everyone is turned against payroll and hates the concept and thinks it's all going to fail. The skill set of doing that, the project has changed in terms of the change management involved, the aspects you're thinking about as you're bringing it through, and all that. So really going, there's an assessment piece to understand the whole context of the project and the organization to really then go, cool, where do I sit? Does this fit? Is this going to set me up for success? Cool. Thank you, George. Cool. And this is a cheeky plug for the Christchurch BA meetup, which Beck Cortese, who is online here tonight, is speaking at, and that is on the 18th of June. That's going to be all about how you put a change manager hat on while being a BA. Many people who work in this area would know that often they don't hire change managers. So guess who has to do it? Thank you, George. Beautiful. So I believe there's some Slido questions, hopefully.
Yeah, thank you for that, Bon. Yeah, right now we're going to move into the other section, the Q&A. You have the Slido link, and you can start putting up your questions over there, so we can have a bit of a Q&A and a bit more of a discussion. So you can scan this code, or the link is also on the chat. I think it's one of the previous messages. And now let's try to make this work.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. So if you put questions, they're going to start showing in this list. So you're going to have a bit of a time to send your questions. So why don't we start with this is an easy one, I think. When you start to move into, you mentioned something that when you start moving into your BA roles, it was a bit difficult for you to prove that you had all the skill set, but not
Yep.
quite the job title. And what was your effort what were the steps you followed to try to prove that so you can enter the market?
Cool. So I think a lot of it is about going taking that job description or whatever you're looking at, the general description of a BA, and go, if it's requirements analysis, you go, well, I haven't done requirements analysis, but I've done this thing which equates to it. So you're constantly just going, reframing your experiences so that anyone can make the leap of logic. So this is much easier if you've got experience, say business analysis focused recruiters, because that's what they do. They understand we're looking for this skill set. We're not looking for this person with a business analysis role. It gets much harder when you're trying to get through the gate with, say, a large organization that has a recruitment team. They're not going to necessarily be turning around recruiting BAs a lot. So they are often looking for that business analysis. So, there's some cheat ways of just reframing some of those job titles, maybe in brackets putting business analyst or business analyst, and just really reworking your CV so that those skills that they're looking for shine through, and using sort of, I did this, here's the sort of cases where I did this.
Yeah. How do we know what toolset is fit for purpose if we're new in our BA roles?
So I think this is, if you are new, and let's say you like well-defined problems, and you've identified your fit, then generally you're going to be relying hopefully on the frameworks that those organizations have set up. So, in those well-defined problems, you're normally following a pretty standard project methodology. If you're going to do requirements gathering, then I guess it's Dr. Google's always my friend for tips and tricks of, if I'm approaching something, I'm like, oh, what'd be a good way or an innovative way to approach this? Google, Google, Google.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this one is maybe related to the last one. What should we do if there is no existing playbook within the organization? Where do we start?
Cool. So I think, as with any good BA world, it would all start in a workshop or something. So you just reframe it. So if you were trying to solve any other problem, what would be the steps that you'd go through, but now you are consciously flipping the problem to be thinking about how you go about solving the problem. So you're now workshopping that concept of, and actively designing the concept of not just I'm trying to resolve my core problem. I'm now actually thinking about how am I going to do the approach. And so literally taking that time to step back and do that thinking is going to give you a massive leap forward. Just recognizing you don't know how you're going to do it, stopping, reflecting, and sort of brainstorming those ideas. And then there's almost no wrong answer here. Yeah, because you go, as long as you identify somewhere to start, you can. And the key with a lot of those highly undefined problems or undefined problems is uh, just don't bite off the whole thing. Yeah, so you might go, I have no idea where this is going. So the first thing I'm going to do is just go find out more. And I'm really clear that we're in this vague period. So we are going to approach this by saying phase one is discovery, and we're going to go do this. That's going to lead into a follow-up thing. And I'm not going to bite off too much once I know, and kind of think of it like you're um yeah, discovering through fog. The fog will start to clear the more you know and the more of that plan you put in place, but it doesn't have to be there from day one.
And you also have a concept that is on the website that is related to do not trust the scope, just question it along the
Yeah,
way.
I'm a massive believer that when people tell you their problem, I prove it first rather than believe it.
Mm.
And the second part of that is going, if someone says, we need this, and you get in there and you recognize that, well, they sort of need that, but what they really need or the root cause of the problem is over here, then I will always try to pivot those projects to be dealing with the right thing. So always, questioning that scope.
Mhm. Yeah, maybe this is more in practice. And in your experience, do you feel the high defined BAs are honest about their limitations, or they try to force their way through the undefined problems?
So I think it's less malicious than that, is that normally people don't have this concept of definedness understood at all. So they just go, I'm coming into a project. They don't understand the idea that I could be coming into a project where I'm set out for success or set up to fail. And so I think the first step is just that awareness is going to put you in the right place to go, even if I'm in the wrong environment, knowing where I'm at and uh, forcing myself to stop solving the problem and step back to think about how I solve the problem is at least going to put you in a much better position than if you just race in blind. But yeah, I think it's awareness, but also, yeah, I've seen lots of people get into those projects where it does not suit their, I guess, their style, and they are miserable. And I would highly, highly not recommend it because, you just it's no fun to go to work and struggle 8 hours a day.
It's a tough one. Yeah. How can a BA differentiate between a project needing adaptation of existing methodologies versus one requiring a completely new approach?
So I think it's probably more that it's a spectrum of going, those highly undefined problems often end up being the way I'll solve them is a mixture of defined playbooks. But there's a journey I have to go to understand what those playbooks are. So it's not very often that you're having to go completely new out of the box. It's more like you're doing a bit of a pick and mix and going, okay, it's going to be a little bit of that and a little bit of that and a little bit of that, and I'm going to mash that together to make my playbook. So those sort of highly undefined ones, where they start is you're so undefined that you don't even know the width of which of those playbooks are. So I've kind of got my own playbook for taking a highly undefined from highly undefined to undefined. And from undefined, I'm generally then adapting the playbooks. rather than inventing new.
Yeah, and also your methodology aims to going from a state of uncertainty where the customer knows enough so they are confident to make decisions to move forward.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm. Um, what criteria would you use to assess if a BA is a good match for a project or a role?
Cool. So I do literally in interviews take people through that through that model and talk about what it looks like to be in a highly undefined versus a defined, and really get them to reflect on that. So I will normally get them to do that reflection. And yeah, not most people, it's like, tell me about a time when you're in this sort of world versus this sort of world. And when I hear how they talk about those two worlds, you could very clearly tell, where they, I guess, where they flow in their answers versus where they shake in their boots. So it's normally fairly easy to get people thinking about that. And once they're thinking about that, again, it comes to that awareness. People are pretty good at self-identifying where they live on that spectrum.
Yeah. We have another question that is more related to your career movement.
Cool.
How did you transform your career from being working for an organization to freelancing?
Cool. So I, after I sort of went from corporate BA world to working for a SME in the construction industry, essentially the work I did to transform that business, I went, well, there's lots of construction companies in the same boat. So I started very much in I guess in a vertical. So I started mostly focusing on construction firms. So I had uh, had a much easier product to sell, which was, I will help you do this specific thing. Selling business analysis services is the most vague, hard to do things in terms of, it's much easier to go, someone's got a project, they're looking for a BA, that's great. When you're trying to sell to people who have never heard of what a BA is, don't know the value you can bring, it's a much different proposition. So yeah, I was able to sort of go vertical first before then I went back to being more general.
I have a question of probably someone who wants to take a shortcut in your methodology.
Yeah.
How can we leverage AI tools for undefined projects?
Yeah. I think this is probably the problem, that generally where the AI tools will work well is as we come or go up that spectrum more to definedness. So um, there's a challenge of trying to actually understand the problem enough to be able to express it that we could even put it into an AI tool. So um, yeah, I think wrestling that first piece so you understand it enough is always going to be a human involvement. I think we are going to find it easier, if I'm writing requirements, the days of sitting there and typing out all of those requirements are probably done as these large language models. You just go, write me the requirements for an HRIS system. Yeah, especially those well-defined projects, we should be able to take those mundane tasks and go, cool, get rid of those. Yeah, I don't do a lot of requirements anymore in terms of, I go anti-requirements almost. Yeah, I'm doing an HRIS system. First requirement, it needs to do HRIS things. Tick yes or no. Next requirement is, we've got these weird edge cases. Can it do those? So yeah, I'm not spending weeks of time ticking off mundane. Needs to be able to log in like this. It needs to be able to have a response time of this. Those days are, for me, well gone. You're now just really going speed those process up and focus on the edge cases to get those through.
Yeah, when you're talking about undefined problems, necessarily there is a bit of conflict
Yep.
happening on the organization. What should I do if the challenge I face borders on difficult stakeholders and team members?
Cool. And so again, I would I would take this as breaking the actual core of what I'm doing with the project and treating this as a secondary problem that I need a playbook for. So that now, in terms of my approach to solving the problem, is not just how do I get this, process problem solved or this efficiency. I've now got one playbook for how I'm going to actually do the work. I've now got another playbook, which is all about how am I going to bring those people on the journey. Um, I I start that change management journey from conversation one, and so I will always be painting the picture of where we're heading and trying to preempt a lot of that as I go. And some of that just comes with experience, but I think the key is if you recognize you're in that situation, it's about being proactive about actually planning that approach.
And this is another one, very close to your experience. How do you balance the need to be productive as soon as you hit the ground versus establishing the situation and playbook required,
Cool.
the percentage of the
Yeah.
contract?
So I find for me, and yeah, it's a little bit different working in, say, a consulting environment where I don't have the luxury of existing knowledge, but I also need to win trust really fast. So I will generally go in, and my first thing is about playing back the messaging that I'm hearing in a way so that people go, ah, yeah, that's me, or that they feel like, oh, I didn't think of it that way. So trying to give those aha moments of just how people are talking about the problem so that I get a quick win that people go, oh, yes, wow, okay, I trust that. And that will then buy me time if I'm not ready to start talking about the approach. But that said, I also have a pretty standard approach for how I approach highly undefined problems. So, I always go, cool. So what we're going to do first is we're going to look at what does good look like. So we're going to step back from the problem and say, okay, if we had solved this, what does this look like at the end? It's less of this, it's more of this, it's the outcome focused things. I'll then look at process and we'll map process. And then, so I've sort of got a way already that I don't have to always come up with the end playbook because I've got a way of taking my playbook for highly undefined to undefined already mapped out.
And can you link somehow your own personal history and your experience as a man of science and logical thinking going into solving people business problems?
Yeah, I mean, it's I because I've seen so many different businesses across so many different worlds. Uh, I guess some of the ways that I can help speed up and have that big impact is that
Mm.
I know I can go, cool. You've probably got this problem. You're facing these pain points, and they go, oh, yes. It's like, I did a speech the other day where one of my key messages was, "You're not special." Yeah, there's a lot of the stuff that we can take from one place to another and do that.
Have you tried to to work through undefined or defined problems using design thinking?
Yeah, to a degree. And I think it really depends on the audience that you're working with and the maturity. So, um, yeah, there's certain I guess customers or clients that I work with who really just need a very strong hand through that process. That the design thinking process, they're just not ready for it. Yeah, they need to kind of be taken on that journey, much more told where we're going and what we're going to do and why, and that gives them the comfort and security. Whereas, yeah, I think if you get the right business with the right level of maturity that are really up for it and ready to go, that design and much more collaborative approach is there. But yeah, I do have a tendency to work with low maturity businesses, which for a specific reason that they're sort of parachuting me in to help drive a much more direct route to a solution.
Yeah, if it's something that we can see that you're leveraging your teaching experience. So we have this question:
Yeah,
what transferable skills from your teaching experience are highly valuable in your
cool.
current BA career?
Yeah. So I still do a lot of training and I'm always thinking about how do I get people from their current state of knowledge to where we need them. Yeah, so it's all very transferable. Yeah, I think especially if yeah, especially in that training, where you add value is going. I don't just assume where people's knowledge starts or the steps they need to take. When we are training, we're going, how much can they actually take in, all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, having a training mindset is, I find, very useful in a lot of what we do as a BA.
We have just 2 questions left. Just you will be resting soon. uh, can you highlight some tools and techniques that are necessary for a BA beyond Microsoft Office?
Yeah. I think for me, process, being able to write down process is a key skill. Whether you're on the IT end or the business end, it's such a critical piece of decision making is understanding process. Doing lots of IT led projects at the moment, which I openly admit to people, these are process change projects hidden as IT projects. So whatever you're doing, the ability to write that flow and communicate it. And I don't care how you write the process, as long as you write it in a way that you can communicate it. So you don't have to be a BPMN or a specific format. I change the format that I document process all the time to suit the audience that I'm sharing it to, or the tools that they've got, or anything like that. So process, that ability. And the second piece is around communication. So being able to, there's no value in you having great ideas if you can't share them in a way that compels people to make the right decision. So I am always thinking about how I present information. I very rarely use Microsoft Word as a tool for presenting information to get decisions made. I find it's not visual enough. Me writing 4,000 words on a topic is not going to compel someone very well to make those leaps of logic and get there. So tools, whether you're doing it in PowerPoint, or I use Lucid a lot and things like that, I'm always kind of going, how do I sell this thing right from the first point that I'm actually writing it up? I'm thinking about the messaging and the selling.
Just to close, a final life lesson we're asking you.
Yeah.
What essential skills or experience are required to determine your correct positioning?
Cool. One good way is to be in the incorrect position once. You'll learn pretty fast about where it doesn't feel comfortable and why. Um, Otherwise, I think I think people know in themselves that, if I said to you, I'm going to put you in a project with a team that's don't really know much about what they're doing. The problem is this, and it's pretty vague, and we don't really know what we're going to do, but we'd like you to work out the approach. And some of you are sitting there going, yes, sign me up. And others are going, whoa, panic attack. Um, yeah, I think, inherently people are pretty self-aware. And so it's just taking that moment to apply that awareness, and do an assessment of the project and the environment and the maturity and all of that. So just it's the BA skills that you would use on the project, use them on yourself, and use them to analyze the project itself. And yeah, we've all got those skill sets to do the analysis elsewhere. Just stop and apply them to yourselves.
All right. A lot of new knowledge, tools, and experience. Thank you so much, Vaughan. It's been a pleasure having you tonight, and for sharing all your experiences and your knowledge. Please, a big round of virtual applauses, and where do I find the button? Yeah. Virtual clapping for you. Thank you so much for being part of this,
Thank you.
especially this time of the day. It's not always that easy. Always grateful to have you here, and definitely we're going to be looking at your meetup group as well.
Yeah, thanks for the invite.
Creating community here, and thank you all for your participation. And just to remember that the next event of our BA meetup group is BA career group is on the 5th of June at 6:30 p.m. H is just a number, Unpacking Business Analysis Progression with our Ashley Forster. And you can sign up on the meetup group. Obviously, we have everything available on the YouTube channel, and just keep in touch on our LinkedIn page. Thank you everyone for being here, for your contribution, for the discussion, your questions, and I hope to see you the next time.